My name is Bob Plott. I'm the author of 5 books about Smoky Mountain culture and the Plott Hounds. My family originated the Plott Hounds brought them to America in 1750 or thereabouts. And my son and I just finished a book that just came out in March called Smoky Mountain Railways about the railroad systems here in the Murphy Branch in western North Carolina. And I'm here today to talk with you a little bit about the Plott Hound. It's a very interesting subject, I think, and obviously I'm biased, but the Plott Hound tends to be a topic that falls into 2 distinct categories, polar opposites. People tend to be either very knowledgeable about the Plott Hound, know a lot about it, or they're completely clueless and know nothing about it. I'll give you an example. Sometimes I'll be out with one of my dogs and I'll run into somebody who knows me by name, but they're not familiar with the breed necessarily, and they'll say, "Bob, that's a beautiful dog. What kind of dog is that?" And I'll say, "Well, it's a Plott Hound." And they look at me like I'm an idiot and go, "Well, of course it's a Plott Hound. It's your dog, but tell me what kind of dog it is." And of course, then I get a chance to explain to them just a little bit of the story about the breed. And that's what I want to briefly share with you today, because I think it is a very, very unique story like no other. The origins of the Plott Hound are, and I talk about this in my book, there's a little bit of controversy in some cases. Some people say that the entire family came and brought the dogs with them. The family legend here in Haywood County has always maintained that the 2 brothers, my 3rd great-grandfather, Johannes George Plott, brought the dogs with him, and he and his brother came here from Germany. And the story goes that one of the brothers, died en route and was buried at sea. So here was this young boy, not even 16 years old, who was my 3rd great-grandfather, if the story's correct, alone at sea, couldn't turn back on this terrible ship, took 2 months to get to America, and he's got his dogs, and conditions were terrible, rancid water, and the ship stunk so bad when it got to Philadelphia that they had to bring them in little small boats. But they signed an allegiance to the King of England and moved either further into Pennsylvania and then further south into North Carolina. So whether or not that part of the story is true, and I always have believed it is, or whether they came with their parents, doesn't matter. The end result's the same. When they get to North Carolina, you can follow their track as clear as you can see a bear track in the snow. I mean, it's easily documented, it's easily verifiable. And you have this great story of the family just continuing that legacy throughout as they got into the Piedmont of North Carolina, down around Cabarrus County, Iredell County, Catawba County, and then in the early 1800s, around 1803, Henry Plott, my 2nd great-grandfather, brought the dogs to Haywood County. And interestingly enough, he came into Canton out in the Pleasant Gardens area first, settled there, and couldn't make a living there, or not living, he couldn't survive. The crop failed. So he credited the dogs with keeping him alive that winter to provide and help him put food on the table. And he crossed over the Pigeon Gap and followed it, what's now the road into Waynesville, and came right down through Hazelwood and went to the confluence of Richland and Dix Creek, which became Plott Creek. And that whole valley became known as Plott Valley. The mountains around it became known as the Plott Balsams. The creek became known as Plott Creek, and that's where the family has lived ever since and raised the dogs. And of course, nobody's raising dogs there right now, but there are still Plott family members living there. So that legacy's continued, but really that's where the dog really got famous there, because by the 1940s, or actually 1920s, 1910s, people were coming from all over the country to get dogs, obtain dogs, and take them to different parts. And celebrities like Branch Rickey, the guy who signed Jackie Robinson to the first professional baseball contract and integrated professional baseball when he was with the Dodgers, he used to come to Hazel Creek, which is now in the Smoky Mountains National Park, and hunted with my family and wrote letters to my. I've got letters on St. Louis Cardinal letterhead where he wrote to them thanking them for the experience and letting them see the dogs in action. So there's just so many rich stories, so many interesting facts, a lot of funny stories about the breed and the people that owned them. But it's just a really, like I say, a story of classic Americana that just totally parallels the history of our country. And as I said, it goes back to some people say maybe as early as 1742, but others say 1750. But either way, we've been here in North Carolina for well over 200 years, almost 300 years. And of course that continued as the families were bigger then, and a lot of, George Plott had like 11 children. Each of his kids most of them had 9 or 10. And of course, they continued to migrate west and do different things. So it just continued to grow and evolve. And then, as I said before, the friends and family, non-family members really helped take it to the next level. Of course, I'm a dog lover. You'd never hear me say anything bad about any breed of dog, because I think they truly are man's best friends. But when you look at the Plott Hound, there are some things I think that make them very distinctive and set them apart. Now, certainly there are many different types of great hunting dogs, great pets, great friends. Really is a breed apart, I think, from all the others for a couple reasons. One is their Germanic origins. Most of your American purebred dogs came from the British Isles. Plott Hound, of course, came from Germany. Third great-grandfather, Johannes George Plott, brought him over here in about 1750, maybe a little bit earlier than that. Well, since that time, someone in our family has raised these dogs ever since. So there's been a great story there behind that, a unique story of classic Americana that goes back before the Revolutionary War, the French and Indian War, Revolutionary War, War of 1812 on through, and about these wonderful dogs protecting frontier homesteads, serving as hunting animals, herders, protectors, friends, amazing multi-purpose capabilities. Fiercely loyal, fiercely tenacious, just incredibly intelligent animals, just wonderful, wonderful dogs. And of course, over the years, there's been just story after story, and that's one thing I enjoy telling in my books, is the story of these dogs, how they protected frontier homesteads, how they provided food for the table of their owners. And the owners themselves were interesting people too. And I think that's yet another thing that makes the Plott Hound so unique, is that truthfully, as proud as I am of the breed and of my family history, the truth is that the Plott Hound would have been a regional phenomenon had it not been for people not related to the Plott family. So an example of that is I do programs all over the place, and just such kind of what I'm doing today. But I did a program over in Jackson County a few years ago, and I was doing it with a middle school group, and there was about probably 200 kids there, with a couple school principals, teachers, and the county superintendent was there that day. So like I say, there was probably about 200 people there that day. And, kids are kind of tough to reach sometimes, so you want to make sure that you engage them or find a way to engage them. And they were interested in the dog and intrigued by it, but I could tell usually they have a hard time connecting. Well, if my last name isn't Plott, so what's that got to do with me? So I thought about it the night before, and I started thinking about some of the stories in my books about all these interesting people that weren't named Plott, and I went through the alphabet A through Z and just jotted down the first names I could think of, starting with each of those names, starting with A, going through Z. And I found in a very short time, I put together about a list of about 150 names. And so the next day I went and did the program. The program was pretty well received, but I could tell that they still weren't quite connecting with what the story was. That was more my story than their story. And so I said, look, I want to play a game with you. I'm going to say these names, and if you're related, if this is your last name, or if you're related to someone of this same last name, I want you to stand up. And I want you to stay up until I get through with the list. So I went through this whole list, 150, 200 names roughly, and by the time I got through, every single person in the auditorium was standing up. And they were kind of looking at each other like, well, what does this mean? And of course my response was, this means that you or someone you related to in the past or the present was indirectly or directly related in this story. So this is your story as much as it's my story. And you're directly responsible for why the Plott Hound is a state dog in North Carolina since 1989, why we have a state historical marker over in Hazelwood at the middle school there, and why the dog has gained worldwide notoriety today after all these years of almost 300 years of history. So this is your story, and if you're a citizen of Western North Carolina or even North Carolina or related to someone in this region, chances are it's your story too. So I think it hopefully gives them, or gave them and gives everyone a reason to be proud of that being the state dog, the great story behind it, the colorful characters involved in perpetuating the breed, some of them family members, some of them not. And I've included all those stories in my 5 books, as well as a 6th book with my son about trains. And I think that it's intriguing to me to see how the dog has evolved over the years, how people have helped it evolve over the years, and the legacy that it enjoys today, because today, in the 21st century, it remains a multi-purposed animal. Today, it's still a hunter, it's still a herder, it's still a protector, it's still a friend, but it's also a champion show dog. It's also a champion search and rescue dog. It's used for all types of things. So the dog has evolved as things have went on over the years, but it still remained those core values of multi-purpose skills. And I think it's what makes it so special. And the story itself is what truly makes it so special. And it's a story that I'm always proud to share with people. I've been proud to share it with my books. I'm proud to share it in my programs. I'd like to come back another day when we can do a longer program and I can tell you some detailed stories about some of them. Some of them are very, very funny. Some of them are heartbreaking, but they're all true. And again, it just documents the rich history that, again, parallels the history of the United States. I mean, you think when folks came here from all over the world to migrate here, they came here, my family brought their own dogs with them. Those dogs were named after them. And you can go down through history and see these dogs migrating west, where they became such a great value to their owners, ended up in Texas, Arkansas, they're on the Chisholm Trail, and by the early 1900s were in Washington State and gained worldwide fame and notoriety out there. So they literally have been a part of United States history and North Carolina history. And that's something we're very proud of, and I'm proud to help perpetuate that legacy, still raise the dogs today, but more importantly, to let people know the story behind it and how it's their story too. So I thank you for allowing me to be here today, and I hope that you'll check out my 6 books, and I hope we can come back and do some programs in the future.